Hello and welcome to official Mana Dorks episode of Deck Tech. I'm your host, Denied Forever, and we're here with Drake SG with his Urza Lord Blingifizer deck. This deck was played in episode 11 of our Commander series, and to great effect, I believe. The episode is, however, not out, so when it is, we'll get the link to you in the bio. How are you doing today, Drake?
I'm doing well. Just happy to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And today we're talking about your Lord Urza deck, and I feel like there should be a little disclaimer. The price tag's pretty big, as I'm sure everybody can see on the screen. Drake is our resident Post Malone.
Yeah.
But we'll go over at the end that this deck can be a little bit more budget friendly than this. He just has a lot of very special cards in here. But why don't you introduce the deck and tell us what makes it unique?
So I'm sure everyone who's probably watching a deck tech for this deck in particular either has or have their own Urza within their pod. This is actually a change that it was come about in 2016 when Urza was first introduced. The old commander for this deck used to be led by Memnarch, and I've only kept him in here for the nostalgia feeling of playing him again because he can be pretty mean.
Our nostalgia cards of our cardboard.
Yeah.
Well, the deck's pretty old then, but in the ages past, when you built Memnarch, was there something that really made you want to build this deck and change it to Urza or anything along that lines?
Yeah, so it stopped seeing play casually. A lot of people just don't like their stuff being taken, and I can't blame them for that. And Memnarch just straight up does that. That's all he does. He just takes whatever you have. So I was always trying to put this deck out on my cubes, and most of the time people would be like, I don't want to see that. So I needed something at the head of the command zone that was a lot more friendly to play groups than to just take their stuff, regardless of whether I'm drawing a card or not. It's going to come out every game if it's your commander, I feel like.
Right. Can't make yourself the arch enemy every single time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the general strategy behind this deck now, then?
The general strategy, Memnarch is considered a win con now. I'll let people know that. The other win con for this deck is actually a newer one that came out, I think, in Thunder Junction. It's a Simulacrum Synthesizer, and this goes off of the fact that constructs, as I call them, these 0/0 constructs that get 1/1 for each artifact you control, get so freaking big with the amount of artifacts we're trying to play. That you basically go wide artifacts, as I describe the strategy. Put as many artifacts down as you can, and see if you could just run over your opponents.
We've definitely seen that go off plenty of times with your artifact decks. This doesn't look any different. Is there any key synergies that you love about this deck?
One of the greatest things about Urza, I'm sure most people know, is the fact that it spells out tap an untapped artifact you control to add blue mana. What this does is turns on your creature artifacts into mana rocks, and basically anything that could be considered a slower playing card into a ignore timings type card. Because of that, there's actually a really cool combo. You had mentioned that word earlier. If we get into our artifact section between Unwinding Clock and Vidalcan Ori, what ends up happening is you turn your turn and everyone else's turn into also your turn. With Unwinding Clock untapping at the beginning of each player's untap step, you end up having a main phase on their main phase, a combat on their combat, and basically get 4 turns for each rotation of the table. So I really have gotten my most powerful plays with that setup.
When you sit down to play Magic, you're going to play Magic. So I'm assuming, since everything kind of becomes your mana base, you don't really struggle with mana, but how does the mana base work in this deck? Do you have any mana fixing or lands specifically working with this deck?
One of my favorite things that I think a lot of people sleep on is the synergy between artifact lands and just artifacts in general. So you'll see that um, everything, as you just mentioned, taps for mana that basically comes down as an artifact. But there's a lot of hidden synergy I think a lot of people miss on, like Power Depot, for an example. It's like a 50-cent card. And that, like with Unwinding Clock, allows my lands to untap on everybody's turn. Same thing with it goes, I think, unnoticed with like the Mycosynth Garden. For X and a tap, it becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. So for a 0 tap, I can turn Mycosynth Garden into a Power Depot, and so on and so forth. So even though it is a land sphere, it will actually turn into an artifact land, and then synergizes well with the rest of the theme of being an artifact deck. So a lot of these are just weird inputs and mana creation that kind of just synergize with the overall theme of the deck.
Very good. It's probably a moot question. Have you found any underperforming cards that just don't seem to go off that you've been thinking about cutting, or have you done so in the past?
Yes, I'm not sure. I did remember a section here. Obviously, Jeweled Lotus. Let's see recent history. What comes up? So you'll see there's been some takeouts. Wasteland, for an example. Loyal Inventor is also another card. It's basically a tutor. I just don't run the assassin to it, just goes to the top of the library instead of in my hand.
Right.
So this deck over the years, like this is 5 months ago, for an example. I'm actually curious. I'm gonna hit this button. Yeah, I have 11 pages of adjustments for this deck because I've been tracking this one over a long period of time.
This is kind of a pet deck then. So this is something you pull out all the time that you very much enjoy.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of thought that goes into every single one of these cards. No card is in here by mistake. No card here has undervalue or underperforming in this stage of this deck build. That's why I feel so comfortable explaining every single card in here. I think most people would be surprised that there's 8 planeswalkers in this deck.
Right.
I feel like that's a really high number for any deck. But there's just I've won games off of Tezzeret Betrayer Flesh. I've won games off of Karn the Great Creator. I've won games off of Karn Sign of Urza, Ugin Spirit Dragon. Every single one of these cards, Karn Liberated, Jace Mind Sculptor, I've ulted him. Every single Planeswalker here, I've won a game off of that single card alone, and that has left it to be like a star of the show and gotten the upgrades. You'll see like a couple of these cards that just came out this year. Like Karn Great Creator was Bloomborough. That was an old Karn that I used to just like wonder if it was worth keeping in there. And then I had it really overperform in a game, so I knew it was in the right spot.
Right. Well, it's good to hear that everything kind of has its place and purpose. Do you have a best hand to start the game with that you would like to share?
I do. I kind of, as this says in the thing, is a casual bracket for. This deck avoids infinites and aims for more fun of a play style, and I've dumbed down the deck because there have been 2 explosive starts, and I actually really don't like this deck to explode early. There was a combo, if you guys are familiar with Leyline of Anticipation, if it's in your opening hand, it starts on the battlefield and allows you to play your cards at flash speed. So with Gemstone Cavern, Leyline of Anticipation, and Lotus Petal, you can actually turn 1 or let me rephrase. Turn 0, not even before your turn has started. You could start with Urza, the Lord, your commander, on the battlefield, and before your turn starts, having your commander out on turn 1, it turns a lot of heads. A lot of people wonder why why this is only a bracket 4, not a CEDH. And so one of the cards, for an example, I took out was Leyline of Anticipation, because a turn 0 start is insane. So yeah, I've actually gone for making sure this plays either on curve or 1 turn or 2 turns before. I think a turn 3 Urza is where I aim for. Turn 2 is too fast. If I get a turn 1 Urza out, I should probably rethink that card. It's either going too fast or people will not want to play against the deck again.
Right. I think that's a completely fair statement. You don't want to, you don't want to be arch enemy every single time and getting your commander out before anybody's had a turn.
Yeah.
What's a memorable moment you've had with this deck?
Well, actually, great question. That brings me to the most recent episode you actually talked about. Was I saw this really nasty Leveler combo, which if you're not familiar with Leveler, it exiles your entire library. And it does it to yourself. And what ended up happening is I had an opponent with the Jace. I forget the name of him, but he wins if your library is empty if you try drawing a card. And so most recently, I mana drained that Leveler card because I knew the combo. I'd seen it before. And what this card does particularly is it gives you colorless mana to be spent on your next Bane phase. And ironically, I had a Cyclonic Rift in my hand, so not only did I get 5 mana for countering their win con, but it gave me the amount of mana I needed to cast a spell of my own for my win con. So it was kind of dirty. So I stopped their win and I got out a win of my own. So that was a really nice 1-2 punch that I was able to perform on the last game of Mana Dorks you guys invited me to.
I should really remember the name of that Jace myself. I play it, and I just don't. I've won with it. I won with it. I think I won with it in an episode of Mana Dorks as well. I think.
It's a good card.
It's a great card.
Yeah.
I love that Jace. I love that kind of strategy. What's the best advice you can give to somebody who wants to build a similar deck? Probably a more budget-friendly. We don't all have 20 grand in our pockets after all.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. This is by far my most expensive deck. My best advice is to play to have fun. Even though this deck seems like it's going to win most of its games, and you can make this deck to win most of its games, don't. Definitely just understand that part of having fun is touching your cards. One of my favorite things about this commander is for 5 mana, I could just grab a random card from my deck and put it on the battlefield. And that's honestly, anytime I have the mana to do it, I will do that just for the fun. I just want to see what kind of lottery we win off of or lose off of, and just try to have the best time we can.
Totally fair statement. You excited for any of the future sets coming up that you think are going to get some stuff in here?
There's a, what do you call it? A Spider-Man set coming out. I'm of course excited for, being the level of nerd I am, but Aether Drift that just came out, I couldn't have been happier. They introduced at least 3 new archetypes of cards, and that if viewers at home aren't familiar with me, I play artifact decks and almost purely artifact decks. So this set was a dream for me, a highlight for me.
A lot of good artifacts in this one.
Yeah. Aether Spark being a Planeswalker artifact. I'm excited to try to get my hands on one of those. They had an equipment vehicle. Gave double strike. That was a wild one. And then my highlight of the entire set is actually the addition to the mages. Now, this is a little nerdy, and this is like an old blue artifact thing for me. But if you're not familiar with the Trinket Mage, Treasure Mage, Trophy Mage, and then they have 2 others, the Tribute Mage, and just finished off with the Transit Mage. This is a complete set of, no matter what artifact CMC you have, you need tutor for it. And they just finished this block, and I'm really happy about them coming out with the Transit Mage, because now I can tutor for any CMC based off of which mage I draw. So Yeah, that was a highlight for me. Weird highlight, I'm sure, but it made me happy.
Nothing's weird in the world of nerds. All right. Well, I do thank you very much for coming out for us today and getting to know your Urza deck here, the Bling Master. Or
this deck for sure.
Where can the people find you, Drake?
I stream mostly and mostly popularized at Twitch. So if you want to find me there, I do all sorts of different content, but you find it at the handle DrakeSG. So just twitch.tv/DrakeSG. The same handle is true for my YouTube and other things. So feel free to just look for me. And if you're an introvert like I am, then do your best to just reach out and say hi. I'd love to just have conversations if you have questions.
Absolutely. And remember, if you follow us, follow Drake. You can, of course, find us at the official Mana Dorks on YouTube, or we stream on Twitch through the Necro Ninja, where you can find us streaming games of Commander mostly. And thank you all for coming out. Have a good day. Peace.
Thank you so much for having me.